Today we're going to talk about the AI retouching program Evoto. Now Evoto is a very famous program. It's been the most requested thing to cover, and I see people struggling with it, especially whether they're not sure how far to go, and it can be quite difficult, especially if you aren't familiar with how far to go. We'll take a look at where it really shines, some of the settings that I recommend, and what else it's good at, like backgrounds, hair, clothing, glass glare, where it fails, where it doesn't fail, and can it ultimately just take care of all your retouching? So let's take a look and show you how Evoto works. Before we jump into this video, I do want to say that this is a sponsored video. Now, I took this under a couple of conditions. Number one, I said that I wanted to be completely honest and genuine with my thoughts. I didn't want them to even see the video before I went live, and they didn't. So I got to say what I liked and didn't like, and these thoughts are very genuine and true to myself. So let's get started, and I will go and show you some of my favorite things and how to navigate the interface. Now, the first thing here is that we open up the program, and you're going to see on the left-hand side, new project or create project. That's kind of where you want to go. So I'm going to hit create project and name the project that I'm looking for. So I'll just say test and hit save. And this is where you can import images or your Lightroom catalog, but normally I just import images. That works best for me, and you can explore these different options. You can also do the different supported formats here. So you can see it does take a lot of images from RAW to TIFF, etc. Now, because I already have a test folder set up, I'm not going to re-import these images. I'll just go back to my home, click on Evoto test, and there it is in there. Now, the first question I think is important is, why would you upload TIFF files versus RAW files? And personally speaking, you can upload RAW files in here, but because every program has a different way that the colors are presented, you would normally go to Lightroom or Capture One, export images that way once the colors are to your liking, and then import it here. But you can also try importing RAWs here. I think the color renditions will be a bit different. It might not be to your liking, or it might be to your liking, but that's just an option that you have. Personally, again, as I mentioned, I use TIFFs or JPEGs normally, and then use this as my pre-retouching step before I go into Photoshop and finish anything else off there. Now, that being said, the first thing you will see when you jump in is going to be a few different tabs here on the right-hand side. This is where you will navigate between the different tool sets. By default, you will see color adjustments, which it lands on when you open it up. And this tab specifically is for filters, AI color looks, etc. And then you will see HSL, color grading, detail for sharpening and all that kind of stuff. So it has the basic things in there too. But the main thing on this area, which I think is pretty cool, is going to be the AI color adjustments. And there's a separate tab as well for that in case you would prefer to have its own individual tab, which has more options. And the way this works is that, for example, it comes with a few different looks already. So if I click on this one here, you can see it tries to emulate those colors, which I think, sometimes it does a good job, sometimes it doesn't. Like this one, I'm not a huge fan of, but just really depends on what you're trying to go for. The other good part is you can also upload a reference. So you can upload a reference image, and then it'll match that, which I think is very powerful. Granted, it's going to be up to personal preference how you color grade, but that is another option. You can also create a reference with any image. So if you have an image that you want to create a reference of, you can do it that way too. But I personally would just upload the reference here, and it'll try to match it. So going back to the color adjustments panel, you can also open up all panels here if you want, but that's not really necessary. And if you're not doing any of this stuff, you can just reset it and be done. And from here, you can also upload references as well. You don't have to go to the specific tab and do it that way. You can also mask anything that you'd like. You can mask the subject. And if you prefer then to only change the exposure of the subject, you can do that. So I think that's very powerful and very useful. Aside from that, you can also create presets on the left, which you can pretty much do in any tab as well. But these presets are for skin or color, depending on what you're going for. Now let's go to the fun parts here. Now, these images are not my own. These are images that I'm using as an example, which is why you'll see weddings and things like that. We'll cover all that as well. So click on Portrait Retouching, and this is where I think most people are interested in tuning in. But here, Portrait Retouching has a lot of different options. You could change the acne amount, or I should say reduce the acne, or keep it, or like that. But let's give you a really good example here. I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to adjust the slider here like that. So you can see it actually does a very good job of taking care of it and still keeping all the texture prevalent, which does a great job, right? Like even does it here on the skin as well, and it keeps the texture. So unlike a lot of skin smoothing programs, this one doesn't necessarily blur the skin. It just keeps the integrity of the texture and analyzes it and does it that way. Now, the other part is you can keep the freckles if you want, but it doesn't seem to keep all of the birthmarks here. You can also go ahead and manually tune it. So, if you would like not to touch the birthmarks, you can do so that way and fine tune the results. So it's okay if it goes a little bit further than you'd like. You can easily fine tune it. You can also reduce the amount, excuse me, the amount of acne that it takes out as well, and also keep the face moles if you'd like. But as you can see, I have masked that. Let's just try that again. There you go. So it has a separate identifier for moles, which is interesting. Also, you can change different options here, and I'll just go through a bunch here. And the way that I like to look at it in terms of workflow is I will go to the blemish removal, click on freckles and acne, right? Bring the slider back for freckles, do some fine tuning here, and then go down further to skin retouching. And here I will go ahead and then do the dodge and burn, or I should say not the sculpt one. Where did it go here? Body skin, even dodge and burn, right? This is just for the body. And then you can also do, here we go, sculpt, even. This is the one. There we go. So let me take a look at another image here, and I'll recreate that a little bit better for you. So I'll firstly go ahead and increase, right? Like it does a pretty decent job here. Like it actually takes care of a lot of the acne on the skin, which I think is pretty incredible. Sometimes it does get a little bit soft, but with the higher concentration of acne, that will typically happen. And if I take a look at another example, same thing here. That one's already done. Let me actually go to this side here. So freckles and acne. Okay, let me see what else. This is what I was looking for. The other one that you saw was the already finished version, which is why you didn't really see anything happen. Okay, here we go. Freckles and acne, just like that. And then coming down to skin retouching, it has the sculpting, the dodge and burn, right? Or evening. And the difference between these two here, the evening is more like a micro contrast dodge and burn, where at a pore level, it evens things out even further while keeping the texture. And then the sculpting itself is more of a global sculpt, right? Like it's makeup contouring basically. But I prefer just using the even dodge and burn, which is the micro transitions. Similarly, if I go to this image here, you can pick between the two subjects and then work accordingly, and if I go to his, so I can then have different settings for different people, which I think is pretty cool. Now, it has a bunch of different other options. Let me pick an image like this where it has some of the body and the face as well. So let's just say, you come over here and you decide that you want to remove the blemishes here. You can also reduce face shine and do all kinds of things like dark circles, which are here, which you can take care of as well. Any of the eye bags as well, which I sometimes find overlapping with dark circles. but this is a nice way to kind of segment them if you feel like you want to go further, perhaps. There's also glass glare, which we'll get into a second, different wrinkles. For the most part, I think that it does a really good job identifying where it needs to remove what. And the other good part is you can sync the results. So if you decide that you want this applied to this image, you can just hold Shift and click on the next to one here and then sync. And then just go ahead and sync everything. And then what it'll do is it's going to sync the effects to the rest of the images, which then allows you to quickly export and be done. You can also tether if you want into this. So whatever settings you apply will be applied to the next image, so that if they end up seeing their results on the screen, they'll be like, wow, I actually look pretty good. And it'll translate to a lot more sales. That's kind of the way I look at it. So let's just say, again, a full body image like this, right? I had to do my freckles and acne removal. Now we can also go ahead and do body refinement. So there's body blemishes as well. So it can identify the blemishes on the body as well. You can do armpit touch-ups. So in case, your armpits are more visible and you want them to be less visible and less pronounced, you're able to do that. And again, the great part is the texture is retained, right? It doesn't do a perfect job in the sense where there's some things that might still be visible, right? I'll do a before and after here. Let me before and after view. There we go. Let's just do here we go, spacebar as well. So hitting spacebar shows you the before and after. So you can see there's some little dots here still left that I'd normally get rid of as well manually, and some of the blemishes on the eye too. So it gets you quite the way there, and it's a good base to use going forward in retouching. So as I mentioned, you can go further by coming down here to body refinement, right? That's where we do that. And then go to facial skin if you'd like, and then even through the dodge and burn that way. Because you can see the dodge and burn now kind of just does some gentle work here and there. I wouldn't recommend using texture smoothing, because I think that will then end up taking a bit too far. Personal preference. Same thing with frequency separation. I think this is similar to like texture smoothing, but giving you more capacity to adjust and modify. And if you're not familiar with frequency separation, this is basically where you can adjust the texture independently from the color, right? So personally speaking, I would be very hesitant in using this to the full extent because it is quite intense. So you'd have to be very gentle. And then the high frequency relates to the texture, which you would then modify accordingly. And then low frequency would be the tones or the colors of the skin. So again, as I mentioned, I would be hesitant using this, especially because we did all this other work with the other sliders. And once you get to that point, I don't think you need much else. So once the evening is done, there's again skin softening, but like I told you before, it might be too much. And then you also have body skin separately. So if you want to dodge and burn that too, and even that, you're able to do so. But more importantly, it has the same kind of options, skin softening, etc. But the important part here is once, typically the retouching is quote unquote finished or ready to the next stage, you want to do unifying of the colors at the end. So you'll see here the neck and the body has different skin tones. You can unify the complexion. So if I click on, unify AI, unify body complexion, it brings the tones closer together than what they were before, right? So you can see the difference in the color tonality of the body. Same thing with the face, which is nice that it's a separate slider. The face has less color issues than the body did. So again, you have to be careful because now when I unify the face, it kind of affects some of the makeup here. So just be aware of what you're doing before you do it. You can, of course, refine it with a mask, but the mask is going to be refined to all these other results as well. So keep that in mind. Now, once the unification is done of the colors, let's take a look at the before and after. So you can see just like that, with a few slider adjustments, you're able to get quite far. And this is kind of where I would then take it into Photoshop. So again, a couple of tips. You bring your freckles acne slider up all the way. I think it'll do a good job. And if it doesn't, you can bring it back and keep some of that texture like that, which I think is important to do. Because if you go too far, perhaps it might be too much and the skin looking too soft. So you can just push it back a little bit and get some of that texture back. And then from there, you kind of want to just come down to body blemishes if you want, evening out the skin by doing the dodge and burn, and then doing some body skin work and AI unification for the skin tones. So that's kind of my general workflow. Now, aside from skin, it also has hair and makeup, but primarily we'll talk about hair. So let's just say that you're trying to, fix some of the flyaways, right? That's typically what I see happen a lot. So I'll go to stray hair removal and increase the sliders here. So you can see that the stray hair removal does a really good job of actually removing the stray hairs. Now you can bring it back as well by using the slider here, because sometimes, it goes too far and it might not look as realistic. So this way it allows you to determine how far you want to go. So the stray hair removal slider isn't just opacity, but it's depth. It works actually really cool. Like you can determine exactly how much you want it to remove. And then you can also determine which type of stray hairs you want to remove. So as you can see, we've pretty much done everything. Like I even tried to remove this side too. And if you don't want that to happen, there's this within figure outlines slider. So you can use that to ensure that none of the flyaways inside the hair are also gone. But if you do, you can just bring that slider up and it will remove or try to remove some of the flyaways within the outlines of the person. Same thing with smooth hair. You can, if you feel like the hair is a bit too much, I guess, like there's too much contrast happening in the hair and the colors, you can smooth it out that way, which interestingly enough, isn't terrible, but it does have that artificial look to it. So you have to be careful, because if someone doesn't know better, that could look very fake. So you have to kind of decide how far to go. And within that, let's just bring up the smooth hair to 100 and try to play with this tame frizzy hair slider. So you can see that if you're going to use this, I think the best bet here is to smooth the hair and keep some of the frizzy hairs there too. So gives you a few options. You can also increase the hair shine, but I think in this situation, I don't think you really need it. I think less hair stuff, the better, right? Same thing with the hair color. Like that looks crazy to me personally, but depends on what you're interested in. Maybe if that's something for you, but I think what I would do is if I was going to play with one of these, I would change the amount, right? And I would change the darkening. So perhaps it's going to be reset down to 0 and then bring it up slowly if I was going to do any hair adjustments. This could be useful for any issues you might have with color casts. Sometimes the hair can pick up colors that are around the area that you might not want. So you can use this very gently like that to reduce the greens and yellows in the hair like that, and so forth and so on. Now the same thing, let's just pick another image here because I'm kind of getting tired of looking at this particular one. I'll click on this one. So this one is actually a good example because as we talked about the different color tones happening, this works really well in a situation like this, where if I increase the slider for AI Unified Body Complexion, you'll see that the colors of the face and the hand match really well. But another issue that you notice here is that there's glare in the glasses. So let's just go down to that section. Let me see if I can find it here. Skin, body refinement, facial wrinkles, face refinement. Let me just close these here. Let's just say eyes. There we go. So pay attention to this section called remove glasses glare, and I'll increase that, and you can see it actually does get rid of the glass glare, which is Pretty cool. You can also change and add catch lights too. Another example of glass glare is something like this, right? Where if I remove glass glare, it'll take care of it for me. And I think that's going to save people a lot of time, honestly. Let's see, remove glass glare. Same thing. It does a good job. It keeps the detail of the eye as well, which would honestly take such a long time to do manually. So there you have it, glass glare. Let's see what else here. I'll go back to the other image I was working on. They also have a feature for hands, which is pretty cool. So you can also, if there's any particular hand veins going on, you can do it that way. There's also liquefying options too. Not that I would personally, use this or give you an example of how you should necessarily use this, but it's worth knowing it's there in case, you have a subject or a client that would like to use it. So the only thing to really know about it, to be honest with you, is that it has this AI reshape function. And then you can play with different subjects and identify who you want to change and then play with it that way. You can see the body and height are really not there, but depending on the image, you have different options. And again, it can be really intense. And if you're not good at liquefying in Photoshop, this is an easy way to do that. Sometimes this can be useful, especially if, let's say that you are using a different focal length, and sometimes the head might be bigger than they are in real life. You could use that option for that and do it that way. So if you have any other suggestions for them, I think it'd be important to leave a comment, and they can actually address it or take your comments in mind for future updates. Aside from that, let's just take a look at something like this, where you have wrinkles in the clothes. Now, before I go on, let me just see if there's anything I'm missing that I wanted to talk about. But, aside from that, you have the hair and eye options. Eyes, you can remove red lines in the eyes if you so choose to. You can see that the red lines disappear in the eyes. You can increase the brightness as well. And even in the brightness, you get a whole list of different things. You can change the brightness of the iris. You can change the whites specifically. And this is important because sometimes you only want the iris to be a little bit brighter, not the entire whites of the eye or just even the reflections. And it gives you a lot of control, more the control than I was expecting. So it's all hidden under there, under the brightness drop down. So teeth as well, you can retouch teeth, you can whiten teeth, you can change the brightness of it as well, all kinds of stuff. Pretty teeth. Oh my gosh. You can change the appearance of the teeth. I don't know about that one. I think that's going to be interesting. Like they're perfect, but then you kind of have to ask your subject, "Hey, is this something that you want?" I wouldn't just do it, but it is there as an option. What I would recommend is more along the lines of using these sliders here for whiteness and so forth. It's pretty interesting to see what's possible these days. All right, I think that's pretty much all I want to cover for the skin and hair details. But aside from that, you can do clothing. And the way to do clothing is going to be here on the right-hand side. You can actually de-wrinkle clothing if you wanted to do that. And using the de-wrinkle slider here, again, it has a mask. So if you don't want, the suit to be affected, you just kind of click on the suit here, just doing a rough mask. And you can see then it's just the shirt here and then that side of the suit, right? So you can de-wrinkle. You can also choose between, let me just reset this for a second. You can choose between deep wrinkles, which is most of it, or fine wrinkles, which this one doesn't have as much of. I think I saw another image that had more fine wrinkles. Was it this one? No. I guess it wasn't in this particular image here. But same thing, it's allowing you to de-wrinkle clothing, which I think is pretty cool. This one doesn't necessarily have any wrinkles to necessarily work out, but an image like this would as well. So you can see here, if I kind of just increase it, it kind of takes care of that. You kind of have to be careful though how far to go, because you do expect some wrinkles to be present. It would just look weird if the wrinkles were gone and then you just had this big one over here. So that's that. It has the same kind of options to adjust the type of person you're working with, or all of them, and then going forward with that. You also have different crop and rotate options if you need it, but I don't really use that. You can also connect to a camera, which is where the tethering section is. You can also have a watch folder. Now, this watch folder is pretty cool. What this is that, let's say you don't feel like re-importing your images into Evoto, you can set up a folder here to watch. Let's say like it's let's say you're tethering in Capture One. You can set this particular link to be the images that are coming into Capture One. So then once you set the folder that you're looking for, it will automatically show those images here. You could then, go into your settings and retouch everything you want, and then export it from here if you choose to. So it's completely optional. Another way to use it is that I sometimes will export from Capture One onto my computer. I'll have a nice TIFF with my color grading Capture One, and then in here I will use the watch folder to see where those TIFFs are, and then run the retouching right on top of that, and then export it from there. So you can do all kinds of things. Same thing with Lightroom. You can load it and then use it as a watch folder, and then just retouch it and export it again. So it prevents you from doing the extra step of importing, which is kind of cool. And it'll auto export as well, which is kind of fun. So you could, just watch it, run a preset, because you can save presets for all the settings. So let's just say that, I go back to my retouching and I decide that I want this as a preset. So I'll just say save preset, and I'll just say Evoto test and say save. And then once that's done, I have my watch folder. I'll run a preset Evoto test on everything that comes in, and then I'll just auto export to wherever it is that I'm trying to export to. So it makes the retouching pretty quick, especially if you don't want to keep importing and exporting. And you can see the different filters that it has, and there we go. So aside from that, on the left hand side, I mentioned different presets. You can combine color presets with let's just say update with current settings. That won't do anything because we're already using that as a preset. But you could do color presets or skin retouching presets. It also comes with recommended presets as well, but I personally wouldn't necessarily know what to tell you here, except just play with them and see which one you like. If you do like any, if you don't, that's okay too, because they're just ones that come with the program. Next, we do have different masking options, but typically I think the masking can be done in stages, which is what I prefer doing actually. Is if it requires masking, I'll do it in individual areas like you saw me doing earlier with his blemishes. And then finally I have the history. So if you went too far somewhere, you could just go back to any point in time and kind of be done that way. And then from there, you can also use the healing brush as well. So let's just say that there's a specific blemish you kind of want to get rid of. Then you just click on the healing brush and then do it that way. And that way you can do some manual retouching. So in case, it wasn't good enough or it didn't go too far, you're able to manually do some healing work, which is kind of nice. It's not perfect. Like you can see here that as I remove that, it doesn't always do a flawless job, but you just have to keep an eye on it and do it a couple of times, and I think you'll get something that you like. Once you're done, you just hit OK, and it's already part of the retouched image. So that's kind of cool. And again, you can just go back here if you want, and keep on going further that way. There's also the patch tool and the clone stamp tool, but the healing brush does a pretty good job that way. Aside from that, there's also liquefying options here. So click on the liquefying tool, and then from there, you can just, do whatever you're looking for with liquefy. The density and everything is set really nicely. So even if you are working out of the box, it'll do a pretty good job. The size here is 400, density is 25, and pressure is 25. I wouldn't really change it unless you want to. There's a reconstruct tool. So if you go too far, you can reconstruct whatever you're working on. Then finally, smoothing out your results. So if you do something that is kind of messy, just click on the smooth tool here, and then you brush over it, and then it'll smooth out your wonky results to something that's more of an average of all of your work. There's rotate. It's very similar to kind of what's in typical liquefy tool settings. So there's that. Again, if somebody wants to know more about the liquefy section, I'll be happy to make a video on that separately, but hopefully you get the gist here. So I'll say, okay, I'll reset this again. And then, yeah, let's just say, for example, you decided you're done. You enjoyed what you did and it looks good and you're happy and you want to send it out to the client. Then you just want to hit export here. And then from the export window, you have a few different options. You can say export settings, where do you want to export it to? Which I would just say Evoto retouched or whatever it is. So we'll make a subfolder here. And then you can change the file name if you want. I normally like to say original file name and then custom text retouched. So then it'll have the file name and then retouch at the end, or you don't have to do that. You can see the example here. Then finally, file settings. Where did it go? File name, file settings. Here it is. So image format, original format, or you can do JPEGs or TIFFs. I prefer TIFFs if I'm going to be working in Photoshop going forward or retouching, because then I can go ahead and click on TIFF 16-bit and continue doing a little bit more work from there if I want to. TIFFs also have layers. So instead of PSD, you can use TIFFs as an option. But if you are going to go straight to print, you can also either use TIFF or JPEG, but whatever it is that you prefer doing. Finally, you have limit file sizes, which I don't really tamper with. I'll just keep it to my percentage and 100%. This is also good if you have a particular limit. So if you're uploading to a platform and they have a limit of file size, you can automatically just limit it that way, but I don't, so I'll just keep percentage high and keep it to 100% if possible. Now, watermark, I don't really do add watermarks, but you can choose your own image too on export, which is nice. And then color space settings, and that is just whatever it was originally. So makes it very simple and keeps it to that. Now, let me hit cancel because I'm not going to actually export it. I just want to show you what that was about. Let's take a look at any of the preferences here. Now, there is a section here, performance. This is all pretty much straightforward. I don't change anything on this side because I think it works perfectly, but you can definitely take a browse here and see if there's anything you want to change there. Now, under preferences, auto connect to camera could be one that you might want to use, especially if you're going to be tethering a lot with it. Software usage, it's very personal. Preview. So the color space, I just keep the default. Preview size you can change as well, but as you can see, it looks pretty good. Cache, I just don't touch that as well because I have enough space. But if you don't have enough space, you can reduce the cache size and reduce it lower. Export, which I think is pretty standard again. And performance, let's say portrait effect, rendering, acceleration, I don't change that. So yeah, aside from that, everything's enabled here. And I'm just going to say, okay. And that's pretty much it. So if you have any questions, I'd love to hear in the comments. And I think I covered pretty much everything. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to talk through. But if there's not, I'll try to address it in the comments and maybe even make another video if that's of any interest to you guys. All right, thank you so much, and hope you learned a lot. If there's something you're interested in, please let me know, and I'll be happy to talk about it. Oh yes, one other thing. the system for exporting images is a credit-based system. So you could download the program for free to try it, but to actually export the images out of here, you have to pay for a batch of images. So let's just say you click on Buy Now in the top right. You're going to get the page where it gives you the price for credits. So one image is 1 credit, effectively. And as you can see, it's roughly 7 cents an image to export. So you don't want to necessarily export every single image in your shoot, but for the selects that you have done, then you can export it. So this is also good because maybe you're tethering and you have all the images, inside Evoto. You can run your preset, run your settings, and then the ones the client selects, you can then export it from there if you want. Similarly, you can go ahead and import the images your client likes, then run the filter and then export it, and then it should be fine. But realistically speaking, even if you export a bunch of images and these are previews for your client, perhaps you've nailed down a session to 200 to 300 images, maybe more. And even if you export all of those, the chances of your client loving them are going to be much higher because they're already retouched and they can select more images. And so it should offset the cost of it. But ultimately, it's 7 cents per image if you buy the annual subscription, which is different plan levels, but 3,600 credits is quite a lot. And it is, as right now, $242, but it always does change quite a bit. And if you do the math, I think it makes sense because retouching 3,600 images is, I think, going to save you a lot of time. So hopefully that worked and you're able to learn something from it. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, please post in the description below. And in the description, you'll also see a link for a few different goodies in case you do want to try it out. Some free images to play with. You can get some credits in the description as well as a link to some other stuff. So check it out and I look forward to hearing from you.